In the heart of a wealthy financial district, a homeless man sits silently outside one of the most powerful banks in the city. But this isn't a story about pity. It's about patience, perception, and how one quiet presence can unravel everything a corporation thinks it knows about status and intelligence. Underscore, 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 underscore. Outside the Loron and Pierce Global Bank. 12 stories of glass, gold trim, and whispered power. A man sat cross-legged on the cold stone steps. His coat sagged from years of wear. His backpack was torn at the seams. The wind didn't seem to bother him, nor did the stairs. He kept his head low, hands clasped loosely in his lap, posture too composed for someone people assumed was mentally lost. He didn't speak. He didn't beg. He waited. The financial district was pulsing with its usual rhythm. Suits rushed by with coffee in one hand and phones in the other. Interns trailed behind directors, nodding eagerly. Clients barked into headsets as if they were commanding armies. The man on the steps? They ignored him like a blemish they couldn't scrub away. Some gave him a glance. Most didn't. The ones who did offered judgment, an internal calculation of risk or blame. A few crossed to the other side of the steps. One man muttered, "City should clean this up." He didn't flinch. The glass doors of the bank slid open and shut in perfect mechanical rhythm. Inside, it was another world. Pristine marble floors, brushed steel counters, crystal clear security glass. A scent of fresh lilies lingered in the air, placed there every Monday like clockwork. Young tellers stood behind monitors. Portfolio managers explained investments over lattes. Every surface gleamed. Every shoe was polished. It was a place where control lived. But outside, the man remained. His eyes lifted only occasionally, studying the building's reflection, not the people, but the motion, the structure, the timing. A student of patterns. He could tell when shifts changed. He knew which guards were veterans and which were rookies based on how they walked. He counted the minutes between lunch breaks without ever checking a clock. He wasn't there by accident. Just before noon, a woman tripped on the top step. Her high heels snagged in a groove between the stones, and she stumbled forward. Her purse flew open, spilling papers and pens. She scrambled, flustered, mumbling frustration. The man didn't move. Neither did the crowd. They flowed around her like she was invisible. Only when a security guard emerged did anyone offer help. The woman never once looked at the man, sitting just inches away. He was background, like a planter or a lamppost. A young child passed by holding her mother's hand. She looked at the man curiously and waved. He didn't react. The mother pulled the child along quickly, avoiding eye contact. From time to time, the man's gaze would rise and fixate on the entrance. Not in hope. There was no desperation in his eyes. More like expectation, as if he knew something was supposed to happen. Not today, maybe, but eventually. He wasn't here for coins or food. He was here for timing. As lunchtime neared, a pair of junior associates exited the bank, laughing too loudly, discussing a deal they thought was clever. One noticed a man and nudged the other. "Same guy still here?" he whispered. "Yep, been here all week. Freaks me out, like he's waiting to explode or something." They laughed again, brushing past him like he was part of the concrete. The man blinked slowly. Then came the delivery driver, third one that morning. This one looked stressed, juggling a tablet of coffee and a brown envelope. He almost tripped over the man on the steps, then shot him a disgusted look and muttered something crude. The man didn't respond. He adjusted his coat slightly and leaned back against the wall. Still calm, still silent. But now his gaze had sharpened. Inside, cameras were being mounted. A PR team had begun setting up near the front counter. Something important was happening today. Something big. But no one had told the man on the steps. Or maybe no one thought he mattered enough to warn. A security officer exited, scanned the steps, and paused briefly when he saw the man. Not out of concern, but annoyance. This wasn't a good look. The man said nothing. He didn't budge. The guard stared for a few seconds longer, then retreated inside, radioing something into his collar. The glass doors closed behind him. The man finally shifted. He sat up straighter now, repositioning his bag at his side. It looked heavier than it should have been. Maybe it wasn't filled with clothes. Maybe not even food. Maybe documents. Maybe memories. No one would ask. No one cared. Not yet. Across the street, a digital billboard flashed an ad. Access. Innovation. Opportunity. Loron and Pierce. Banking for the future. The irony flickered for just a moment in the man's eyes. Then it vanished again behind a veil of stillness. For all their noise, movement, and wealth, no one inside that building could feel the tremor coming. But the man on the steps, he already knew, not in arrogance, not in revenge, just in certainty. Like a watchmaker waiting for the final tick. Something was about to shift. That same morning, just as the city's heart began to race with its weekday momentum, an armored car rolled up to the side entrance of Loron and Pierce's headquarters. It wasn't a usual delivery vehicle that brought secure documents or transported high-value currency. This one had tinted windows, chrome accents, and a private escort. As the rear door opened, the polished black shoe of Charles Beaumont touched the pavement, followed by the man himself, clean-shaven, tall, and sharply dressed in a navy blue suit that fit like it had been measured by a laser. Charles wasn't a stranger to luxury. He was its product, born into wealth, refined by elite schools, polished by Ivy League finance clubs, and baptized by the fires of global banking. He had become the face of corporate success before turning 40. Today wasn't just another visit to a branch. This was a public appearance, a statement of values. He was set to unveil a new financial literacy campaign targeted toward underserved communities, an effort to show that Loron and Pierce care about more than portfolios and private wealth. His assistant, Maya, walked briskly beside him, tablet in hand. "You're live in 20 minutes, she said without looking up. "Press is already inside. We've got local officials, 2 influencers, and the education minister confirmed." Charles nodded once. He didn't say much before a public event. His mind worked like a strategist's board, calculating tone, timing language, even the pauses between words. Every second of this visit was choreographed. Every interaction meant to be recorded, reported, and repackaged as progress. As they entered through the private door, a gust of perfectly chilled air greeted them. The interior was bustling. The PR team had transformed the central lobby into a showroom. Branded banners hung from the railings. A podium was placed near the glass wall, with a row of chairs for guests. Lighting rigs hovered overhead, and a cameraman adjusted angles from atop a ladder. Florists added final touches to a bouquet of white orchids beside the press table. Security details swept the area quietly, checking badges and whispering into radios. Everything was on schedule, just the way Charles preferred it. He passed the receptionist's desk and offered a nod. The receptionist straightened immediately and wished him a good morning. He didn't hear it. Maya leaned in again. Minor thing. Someone from security mentioned there's a homeless man camped out near the front steps. Been there all morning. Some staff think it might look bad for the press shots. Charles slowed his pace only slightly. His brow lifted, but his tone remained even. Has he done anything? No. Just sitting, but right near the main entrance. He thought for a second, then waved the thought away. Have someone discreet ask him to leave. We don't need a scene. Let's focus. He walked ahead through the open space toward the event area, where the podium now stood under a branded backdrop that read, Loron and Pierce, banking the future. The irony of the slogan, and the man outside never crossed his mind. In the upper lobby, a marketing intern tapped her co-worker on the shoulder and gestured through the window. "Is that him?" she whispered. "The guy outside?" Her colleague peered over and nodded. "Yeah, he's been sitting there since, like 8 a.m. creepy stillness." Doesn't talk. Doesn't move. Weird vibe. The intern gave a small shudder. Did he look at you? I think so, but not in a begging way. More like studying. They moved away from the window, comforted by the idea that the glass was a barrier between their world and his. Back downstairs, Charles removed his coat and handed it to an aide. His personal stylist quickly checked his collar and lapels. A sound technician approached and clipped a microphone to his lapel. "We'll go live in 7," Maya whispered, checking the countdown clock on her tablet. "You'll speak for 12 minutes. Then photos with the literacy students. Then handshakes. Then upstairs with the donors." Charles nodded again, his expression unreadable. He always looked composed, even when nerves stirred beneath the surface. It was part of his charm. The media loved him. He was always quotable, never controversial, and dressed like a cover model for fiscal stability. But for all his polish, there was one thing Charles did have: a memory. And somewhere, deep inside that memory, the presence of a quiet, patient man outside a bank stirred something he hadn't yet acknowledged. The event began. Lights dimmed. The crowd hushed. Charles stepped up to the podium, camera lights blinking in bursts. He cleared his throat and began. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. At Loron and Pierce, we believe that financial knowledge isn't a luxury. It's a necessity. It should belong to every household, every neighborhood, every child who dreams beyond their limitations." His voice was clear, measured, warm even. He spoke of opportunity, equity, and the future. He quoted data, referenced global studies, and cited personal anecdotes about small business owners he'd supported. The crowd nodded, impressed. Phones filmed. Journalists scribbled. But as Charles spoke of inclusion, something distracted him. His gaze drifted, just for a moment, toward the glass doors. Outside, barely visible through the glare and crowd, sat the man, still, watching. A flicker of discomfort passed through Charles, but he pushed it down. The moment passed. Applause followed his final line. "Let us be the bank that sees what others ignore." The irony hung in the air like invisible smoke. As the event shifted to photo ops, Maya approached again. "Security says the man still hasn't moved. They're not sure what to do. Want me to have them force it?" Charles hesitated. "No," he said. "Give me a moment." He stepped away from the podium area, excusing himself from a handshake line. He approached the window slowly, watching the man outside through the light reflections. For a second, he thought the man looked directly at him. No fear, no accusation, just calm. "Does anyone know his name?" Charles asked aloud. No one answered. He turned and walked back toward the waiting donors. But the image stayed with him. The man on the steps, unmoving, unspeaking, but somehow not out of place. Not quite a stranger. More like an unanswered question. As the event wrapped up, PR staff collected notes and equipment. Florists removed centerpieces. Attendees spilled out with programs and complimentary pens. No one looked back. Not one of them noticed that the man still sat outside, in the same position, as if nothing had happened. But someone had noticed. And soon, everything would change. Not because of a policy. Not because of a press release. But because Charles Beaumont, the CEO of one of the most powerful banks in the country, couldn't get the eyes of a silent man out of his head. The lobby buzzed with a rhythm all its own. Phones rang in hushed tones, and leather shoes clicked across polished floors. Assistants darted between elevators and boardrooms, clenching folders and tablets like shields. The marble interior, clean, cold, expensive, echoed with soft music playing from hidden ceiling speakers. Clients moved with purpose. Wealth lingered in the air like perfume. Behind it all, the homeless man remained on the steps, still framed perfectly in the sunlight. His silhouette filtered through the high glass walls like a forgotten detail in an otherwise pristine painting. Staff had grown used to pretending he wasn't there, a visual blemish, inconvenient and unresolved. Charles Beaumont moved with practiced ease through the crowd. His speech had ended, but the afterglow of leadership still followed him. Employees nodded as he passed. Partners smiled politely. Interns glanced, whispered, and tried not to stare too obviously. Charles, however, wasn't thinking about any of them. His mind returned again and again to the man outside. There was something unsettling about him, but not in the way people assumed. It wasn't the clothing or the quiet or the fact that he had stayed there all morning. It was the way he sat, as if he belonged there more than the people who rushed in and out. There was no desperation in him, no hunger in his eyes, just presence, calm, unshaken presence. Charles didn't believe in superstition. He didn't entertain notions of fate or signs, but he did trust his instincts, and his instincts were whispering something he couldn't yet interpret. "Sir," Maya called softly, walking beside him as they headed toward the conference suite. "Mr. Iqbal from the State Education Office is asking if you'll meet with his team now or during the dinner session." "Push it to dinner," Charles replied. "Let's not rush introductions." She made a quick note on her tablet, then paused slightly. "He's still out there," she said, more gently this time. Charles didn't respond. Not immediately. He looked across the expansive lobby again, eyes drawn to the door. The man hadn't moved. Not an inch. His head now tilted slightly upward, eyes scanning the faces that drifted past a glass. Not judging, just watching, like he was waiting to recognize someone. He returned to the center of the lobby where investors had started gathering for the second roundtable session. Flashy watches, custom-tailored suits. Conversations about portfolios, cryptocurrency, and growth trends filled the air. Everyone spoke the same language, one of money and motion. But Charles had begun to listen for another rhythm entirely. Somewhere between greetings, handshakes, and financial forecasts, he drifted back toward the large glass front. The man was still in the same spot. A mother walked past, pulling her teenage son with her. The boy turned around mid-stride and locked eyes with the man for a brief second. Whatever he saw caused him to slow down, but the mother tugged him forward. Charles stood there longer than he realized, just watching. A junior manager approached him nervously. "Sir, the next session is ready. They're waiting for your opening remarks." He nodded and turned, leaving behind the sunlight and the motionless man outside. Upstairs, the tone shifted. The conference suite was brighter, more intimate. Round tables dressed in white linen. Bottled water and branded notepads sat at each seat. Name tags gleamed under the downlights. Charles took the stage with ease, but his voice had a different texture this time. Still polished, but slightly distant. The room didn't notice. They listened, nodded, applauded. But Maya noticed. As the session broke for a coffee break, she approached him quietly again. Still thinking about him? Charles didn't deny it. He leaned against the table and crossed his arms. "He doesn't fit." "Fit where?" "Anywhere. That's what's bothering me." Maya followed his gaze to the window beyond the hallway. Though the angle didn't allow a full view, she knew who he meant. Maybe that's the point. Maybe he's not supposed to. Charles tilted his head. "No, that's too simple. He's calculated. He's watching." "You think he's a threat?" "I think he's something, and I don't think we're ready for it." Before she could respond, a call came through her earpiece. A problem with the catering schedule. She excused herself, and Charles was left standing in the corner of the room, trying to shake off a growing discomfort he couldn't name. Back downstairs, the front desk staff whispered among themselves. One of the newer employees, Jonah, leaned over the counter and whispered, "I think I saw him reading lips." Another asked, "What? Like just now?" "No, earlier. I went out to hand a flyer to a client." Walked right past him. He wasn't staring blankly. He was following conversations. "Like exactly." "Creepy." "Smart." Jonah corrected, but no one heard him. Outside, the sun began to dip lower, casting golden shadows across the sidewalk. Still, the man sat motionless. A few people had noticed he'd been there all day. A woman dropped a wrapped sandwich beside him. He didn't touch it. A man tried to hand him a few coins. The man didn't even blink. No thank you, no gesture, just observation. Inside, Charles watched again from the upper floor. The conference lights reflected faintly on the glass, casting a ghostly version of his own face over the man outside. For a moment, it looked like the two were face to face, separated by decades of choice and consequence. The day had deepened into late afternoon. The bank's shadow stretched long across the sidewalk, brushing the toes of the man still seated at its steps. Pedestrians slowed now, not in pity, but in quiet curiosity. They'd passed him in the morning without a glance. But now, having seen him unmoved for hours, he had become a fixture, a curiosity, a silent question that no one could answer. Inside, a teller named Brandon had just completed a successful customer interaction. Young, clean-cut, and overly confident, he was exactly the kind of employee eager to rise fast and be noticed. He overheard a senior manager muttering about the man outside tarnishing the bank's image. That was his moment, an opportunity, a way to show initiative. He grabbed a branded water bottle and tucked in his shirt, straightening his name badge as he strode toward the entrance. The security officer raised an eyebrow. "I'll handle it," Brandon said, his tone layered with self-importance. Outside, the noise of the city had dulled. Brandon stepped forward, water bottle in hand, wearing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. His voice was warm but rehearsed, like a customer service script that had grown stale from repetition. "Hey there, sir. You doing all right?" he asked. The man didn't move, didn't blink. Brandon shifted slightly. "I just wanted to let you know, you can't really sit here like this. Some of the guests are feeling uncomfortable. You understand, right?" Still no response. The man looked up slowly, eyes locking with Brandon's. They weren't wild or threatening. They were calm, unshakably calm. But they held something deeper, too. Something old. Brandon felt it like a sudden drop in air pressure. He cleared his throat and continued, a little less smoothly now. "Look, I brought you water. You're probably thirsty. Just maybe find another spot to sit, okay? Somewhere quieter." The man's eyes didn't leave his. Still no words. Just quiet. Brandon's smile began to falter. "Sir, please. I'm asking nicely. Don't make me call." And then the man finally moved. Just his mouth. A breath. Then words. Not in English. Not in any tone Brandon expected. Fluent, flawless French poured out like silk. Measured, graceful, almost poetic. His voice was deep but composed, each syllable pronounced with the clarity of someone who had not only mastered the language but lived it. It wasn't a question. It wasn't aggression. It sounded like an observation, or perhaps a quote, the kind of phrase that lingered in the air long after it was spoken. Brandon froze. He didn't understand a word. The man kept speaking, calm, steady. Brandon stepped back instinctively, his ears burning. The quiet power of the words cut through the street noise like a knife. A woman nearby had pulled out her phone, filming. A man in a suit slowed down to watch. A mother tugged her child a little closer. More eyes turned. The attention Brandon had wanted was now turning on him, and not kindly. He snapped his fingers toward the door. "Security, I need assistance." The front desk inside caught the signal. The older guard who had spoken with Charles earlier moved briskly toward the door, muttering into his radio. Another uniformed guard followed. As they approached, the man stood up for the first time all day. He wasn't tall, but something about him made him feel larger than life, like he was rooted in the concrete. His movements were slow, deliberate, almost theatrical in their calmness. He brushed off his coat gently, as if dusting away the moment. The guards arrived with a sense of authority, but even they paused when he turned to them and greeted them in that same fluent French. One of them spoke a little French himself, enough to recognize that this wasn't just pronunciation. It was education. Fluency, depth, culture. The crowd had fully gathered now. Phones were out. One young woman whispered, "Is he an actor?" Another said, "No homeless guy talks like that." A journalist from a local financial paper, who had been at the bank to cover the literacy campaign, stepped outside and immediately turned on his recorder. Charles Beaumont, watching from the second floor, saw the commotion and turned to Maya. "What's happening?" She looked down over the railing. "It's him, the man. There's a crowd." Charles didn't hesitate. He descended the stairs quickly, not waiting for his assistant to follow. The lobby felt quiet as he passed through it again, this time with more urgency. Outside, the situation had shifted from confrontation to fascination. The homeless man now stood quietly, watching as Brandon stammered to explain himself to the guards. People weren't just curious anymore, they were captivated. Charles emerged through the main doors just as the man turned his head slightly, locking eyes with him. There was no smile, no accusation, just that same strange familiarity, like Charles had seen it before but couldn't place when. One of the guards leaned toward Charles. "Sir," he spoke to us in French, very politely. No threats, no aggression, just spoke. Charles took a step forward. "What did he say?" He asked if this was how we always greeted guests of honor. That silenced even the guard. Brandon, still clutching the water bottle, looked completely undone. "I was just doing what I was told. I mean, what I thought was right." Charles ignored him. He turned to the man, stepping closer. The man said nothing now, just observed. Charles cleared his throat. "Do you speak English?" The man tilted his head, then replied softly, in flawless English this time. "I speak many things, but most of all I listen." Another pause, another ripple through the gathered crowd. Charles studied him for a long moment. Then, softly, almost involuntarily, he asked, "Who are you?" The man looked down briefly, as if weighing the question like a coin in his palm. Then he answered, "Someone you've forgotten." And with that, he sat back down on the steps. No protest, no drama, just a man reclaiming his place. Charles stood frozen. The crowd didn't know what to make of the moment. They expected more, an outburst, a reveal, something cinematic. But all they got was stillness. And yet, it was a stillness that held the most weight.